Greetings, everyone. This is Leah Love. I want to thank you for joining me here for another video. I have landed upon the option of not having to put myself together for videos, so I am so thankful to be able to have the option to just do a video, just audio. So I wanted to address a comment that I received on my Instagram page. A young, very hopeful black man has been engaging an excerpt of a video that I uploaded, which was an interview between Candace Owens and Kingface. And that excerpt that I've uploaded to my Instagram, which is LeahLoveOnline, has been hugely popular. I think there's like now 15,000 views on it. A lot of people commenting and arguing back and forth on it. But this particular individual has been speaking about the fact that black conservatives are constantly pointing the finger at a dysfunctional black community, but won't go into the community and help them and won't do for the community. And I wanted to share with him many things, but I realize he's younger, and so he still has that energy. And one of the things that pro-black activist movements require is youthful energy, is a youthful, idealistic outlook until it uses that person up, takes all their money if necessary, requires and utilizes and wastes massive amounts of that individual's time. And it's really something that I suppose each individual has to go through. I've certainly been through it. You know, I'm almost 50 now, but I spent most of my between 18 and 35 years old um, wasting a lot of time with pro-black movements. And while I could say a lot of things about that experience, what I will share with you all as a black conservative is what I shared with him is that there are indeed plenty of black conservatives who are, quote unquote, giving back to the community. However, because they understand the very nature of the dysfunction within the community, they've taken to heart a favorite Reverend Ike quote that I share often, which is that you can't help the poor by being poor. And unfortunately, within many different pro-black movements, there is still a lack of personal development within some of the, or a good number of the individual members. There is still a lack of ability to chart their own path and do for self in terms of this idea that they can accomplish what they will. Very much like Marcus Garvey has, entreated, various generations through his writings for, almost 100 years now, that, it's not enough just to chant a bunch of slogans and pound your fists in the air and talk about what everybody's doing to you or what they haven't done for you. But it's not as easy to build up your character, to set your course on a very moral based course of action and put your nose to the grind and just get it done. And a lot of times, my personal experience within a lot of the black movements is that while there may be a few within it who are actual, leaders and putting things together and organizing, the vast majority have been pretty much just needing a space to come and vent. They're not doing much with their lives because they're always citing that the man won't let them do this and the man won't let them do that. And there's a lot of victimization and a lot of victimhood mentality. And so many times they don't even try. There's a idea that when we talk about law of attraction, for instance, or your energy, and there's even Bible verses in the Bible about that. What you keep your thoughts on, that you manifest in your life. And so, much like King Face was saying in yet another interview that I've been sharing, is, there's a lot of disrespect in the Black community. Now you can say, oh, well, that's because everyone else has been disrespecting Black people, so I'm just going to be out here disrespecting everybody else in return. But what happens is that mentality eats you up alive, and you get yourself into a situation where, you're being disrespectful and you're seeing ghosts where there aren't any. You are categorizing every single interaction as an affront to your personal respect. But when we look at the fallout in your own personal life, we're not finding a whole lot of instances of that individual having or showing self-respect for themselves. And when a child is raised on, oh, the cops are killers, the cops are killers, but they're not also told to look at their next door neighbor who's killing more Black individuals than an actual white cop is doing on a year by year basis, a lot of these youths will end up, having an attitude, seeing a certain individual coming towards them as a threat. And so when you are in fight or flight mode, a lot of times you're not the most pleasant, you're not the most cooperative, particularly if you already are involved in the midst of a crime. But even if you are not, there is this thing called your energy and the way in which you present yourself. But because nobody wants to respect the authority, as well as cops in general. You don't have to like them, but you have to understand that that's their job. So if they come at you and just simply ask a question, and you, like King Face was saying, you're popping off at them, telling them F the police, got your middle finger up, won't cooperate, won't put your hands where they can see them as they come up to the side of the car. If you're doing all of that, you're only escalating something before it even starts. And a lot of times, you know, as King Face himself, living in the hood, being around this, being in gangs himself, he can attest to this taking place. And this is like in so many other aspects of our life. If you go to a job interview and you're expecting, oh, these white people aren't going to hire me anyway, you're not going to give, you're not going to give 100%. You're not going to show up with a level of confidence and own this. You're going to show up with an attitude or with a defeatist mentality. And you're just not going to be able to give your best. And so Black Republicans have come to understand this. They've come to understand this mentality where, yeah, it's like with Jesus, am I going to just come and give you a bunch of fish, or am I going to teach you how to fish? And if the student is not teachable, then it makes it that much harder. Or if I am going to have damage to my personhood or my property or my time by engaging with an individual that's not even really ready to hear a message, then that damages all the other things that this person may have going on in their life. And I'm going to give you an example. I had a friend who owned a shop in the West End in Atlanta, and she was very pro-black, pro-militant, very cultural, and so she would often, put together cultural events. She'd have teachers of Amharic and different African languages come in and teach the youth for free. She would provide comedic yoga out in front of her store. If she was having an anniversary party for her store opening, she would pay personally for a Black-owned vegan chef to come cook the food and provide it for free. And of course, in those times, Black folk will line up for something free. It's all about giving them. What can you give me? What can you do for me? Because there's this gaping hole that never seems to be filled amongst people with a certain mentality that everybody owes them something. And yet, and still, despite all that she was doing, she had thefts from her store. She was employing Black individuals. Even her own phone was stolen while she was there helping another customer. A youth came in and stole her phone. She had a whole glass front of her store, and somebody from the neighborhood, threw some bricks through it and completely shattered the glass. Unfortunately, she had the metal gate that she puts in front of her store. Otherwise, they would have come in and robbed her blind. And so this is a pro-Black activist who is given and given and given to the community what this young individual, Black male, was sharing with me on my Instagram, that this is what, successful Black people need to be doing, and that's what they're not doing, and what can you do for us? What can you do for us? But when successful Black individuals do, this is how they get treated in return. And there's this whole concept that Black people have to bleed themselves dry in order to help the quote unquote community that does not seem very much engaged in helping themselves. In other words, if you are invested in your poverty and your victimization mindset, nothing will ever be enough. There will never be enough programs. There will never be enough affirmative actions and excuses and free cards and free meals and free this and free that. There will never be enough, because that's not the goal. When in fact, most Black people, say that they're Christian, but the Christian thing to do is, what can you give to those who are truly in need, but also how can you build yourself up so that you can show yourself approved before God. And I want to close this out as part of my response to Black activists who are constantly talking about the Black Republicans who don't come in the community but simply point fingers, despite the fact that Black Republicans create scholarship programs, they do mentoring, they write books, they have various programs within whatever organizations they have to help youths come up. But no, they're not going to lay down in the street and die for a bunch of people who may not even appreciate it and who may drive right over them because they're angry about something else. And I'm just going to keep it real and 100, because a lot of times Black people are so used to acting like, they've got it the worst, and especially Black Americans. A lot of times there's this whole idea that you've got it worse than the entire population on the globe, and that you've just been so horribly mistreated in 2020. I've lived in Africa. I've gone to West Africa. So a lot of times I look at all these pro-Black activists who've never stepped foot out of the States and want to talk about Africa, Africa. Well, I've lived in West Africa. And so I've seen what it's like not to have your Section 8, not to have your EBT, not to have free health care in terms of, the Medicaid. I've seen what it's like. And it's not pretty. So Black Americans, though they want to claim poverty and whatnot, they are still the most privileged Black people on the face of this earth. And so it's a shame that we can't utilize what we have at our disposal, but what we refuse, because it's the white man did this and the white man and the white man, that we are not even taking advantage of half of the things that we could in order to really better ourselves, not just talk a bunch of talk. And so I'm going to read a few passages from Khadijah Nassif's book, which I like, and I'm going to show you here. The title of this chapter is The End of the Road for African Americans, Part 1. There is no, quote, Black community, end quote. My beliefs about this topic are straightforward, she says. There is no quote-unquote Black community. What African Americans previously had were quasi-communities largely held together by the outside pressures of Jim Crow. During the 1960s, we had the ingredients in place to create fully functional communities. We squandered that opportunity. There won't be any Black communities in the future. Instead, there will be even more deplorable examples of what we currently have: ghettos, slums, and hoods. All of this has implications for our future collective. It also is partly why African Americans are forming a permanent underclass in this country. For now, let's review some criteria regarding functional communities. I believe that Dr. Claude Anderson has offered the best summary of the ingredients needed for a functional community. He discussed these ingredients in his book, Powernomics: The National Plan to Empower Black America. The first necessary ingredient Dr. Anderson mentioned was an independent economy that can supply community members with their daily needs, services, and jobs. It's obvious that the African American business economy can't provide any of this. Let that sink in for a moment. This situation is even less functional than the relationship between the colonialist and the colonized. We can't supply a single one of our needs. The next necessary ingredient, according to Dr. Anderson, is a group code of conduct. African Americans have this upside down and backwards. Not only do many of us reject the idea of having standards of behavior, but we also enable and reward other Black people for doing things like committing crimes that hurt our group's interests. Furthermore, the institutions that would normally assist in establishing code of conducts, such as families, churches, and schools, have collapsed in Black residential areas. Most African American houses of worship are corrupt, ineffective, or both. With the absence of marriage and an out of wedlock birth rate of over 70%, we don't have families anymore. And our quote unquote grassroots have systematically destroyed the public schools that most of us use as free babysitters for our poorly raised, often out of control children. Let's contrast the African American aversion to standards with an example of how some other groups enforce a code of conduct that helps their group interests. Neil Gabler's book, An Empire of Their Own, How the Jews Invented Hollywood, described how Jack Warner of Warner Brothers required his Jewish employees to donate a percentage of their salary to Jewish charities. One reason Mr. Warner was able to do this was because he produced and provided jobs for his own people. He was able to provide jobs because his own group supported his business. This example of support is in stark contrast to African American consumers' general refusal to support African American businesses. Another reason Mr. Warner got away with pressuring employees to support Jewish charities was because there was apparently a consensus among Jewish Americans that this was a reasonable expectation. The expectation that Jewish people would do what they could do to support Jewish causes. This is based on having a code of conduct. All of these things form a positive behavior cycle that African Americans have never been able to grasp. We generally want to shield destructive Blacks from being punished. Typically, we go so far as to support and reward such persons. The final ingredient necessary for Dr. Anderson's functional community is political self government. It's obvious that African Americans are steadily losing what little political representation that we have. It's no longer only whites that we allow to rule over us. We now allow Latinos to serve our political overlords, such as in Los Angeles and Miami. Recently, African American fools in Louisiana allowed America's first Vietnamese American member of Congress to be elected in their majority Black district. A review of these necessary ingredients makes it obvious that we don't have Black communities and that we're not even going to have them. The necessary building blocks for a functional community are long gone and they're not coming back. The notion of a functioning Black community is yet another rotting corpse in the graveyard of dead cultural and political ideas. May it rest in peace. Let's stop camping out in the graveyard of various dead ideas and instead seek to live among the living. So, a rather stark representation of what's really happening in the Black community, but I will say that I think she is spot on that on her assessment of a lack of, a code for group conduct. We have Black individuals that are, for instance, in Chicago, in the hoods, children being shot up, but of course can't speak because there's the no snitch. We have the rap culture, the hip hop culture that promotes gun violence, that promotes shooting each other up, that promotes women calling each other bees and fighting each other, um, and being complete ratchet hoes. And we all support that. Not all, but I'm saying this demographic that's also pushing pro-Black activism, most likely and typically are, quite silent on the very things that destroy the mentality within the Black community, as well as in including their own brothers or cousins or uncles who are shooting up their own men. Because everything, of course, is the white man did this and the white man did that. And so that's where we differ, but I beg to differ in the sense that Black Republicans or Black conservatives are doing quite a bit. It's first and foremost just by being an example of how you can come out of the Democratic Party brainwash and realize that there were Black people living through much harsher times in Booker T. Washington time. Imagine him creating an entire school. The individuals that were the first students were there literally having to build each room that they used for a schoolroom. They had to live out basically in barns the first year in the cold. They were building the buildings as they went along. They didn't say, oh, we're about, 40, 50 years out of slavery. You white folks should be doing something for us. You should be building this for us. We're just going to sit over here and create our hoods, and we're just going to wait for somebody white to come and build this for us. That was not Booker T. Washington's message whatsoever. They wanted an education and they fought for it. Very few, individuals that I happen to see, a lot of times they'll talk about, oh, black education, but at the end of the day, it's not valued in the homes of a lot of individuals in the Black community, particularly in the Black urban areas. There's always so much drama and chaos going on that the teachers speak about this all the time, how difficult it is to educate because they're dealing with so many social issues. And again, it's all about perspective, because you can continue to say, oh, well, my kid is acting bad in school because the white man, whatever, and because. But never mind that, you're bumping Cardi B 24/7 and all kinds of ratchet thoughtness and gangster music, and there's no father around. There's a lot of dysfunction going on in the home, in the hood, right in front of his streets, gunshots. That, of course, is going to have an effect on a child. But nobody ever wants to take personal responsibility. And I think that's a major issue, but it's also one of the reasons why Black conservatives learned that, you cannot continue to give boatloads of fish to people who really need to rewrite the hard drive and learn how to fish for themselves. And never mind what happened over 100 and something years ago. Never mind what's even happening, in the 1940s and 50s. In 2020, with the advent of the internet, you can set up a business from the comfort of your own phone, get a PayPal account, get a WordPress shopping cart, a website, or even sell straight off of Instagram and make your money. I've seen so many individuals make spare cash, make side money, and build whole businesses hustling day in and day out. Just straight up on Instagram or on Facebook. So you can't tell me that, this is not possible in this day and age. It's all about priorities. And so constantly asking someone else to come and do something for you that you're not even willing to do for yourself, that you'd rather spend your days watching Love and Hip Hop and involved in every single drama that you can find on TV when you get off work, rather than sitting with your children, reading books to your children. Turn off the TV, turn off the radio, turn off the ratchet, and do whatever it takes to move out of these neighborhoods. If you don't want your children being killed by your next door neighbor, not by the cop, but by your next door neighbor, you're going to do whatever it takes to get yourself out, move to a smaller city, move in with a friend, and work your way out. I had to do that myself, so I'm not speaking of things that I don't know of. So at any rate, I'm going to close this out. I'm going to be going more in depth on some things that I would rather not share on the public platform, because I know, one of the major things, even what Kingface was saying in his video with another individual on another channel, he was sharing that, one of the things that has really set Black people back is our high level of emotionalism. Nothing can be talked about without ranting and raving about what everybody's done to them, getting all emotional, getting in your feelings, pop off some shots. Like it's a lot, and a lot of that comes from most of us being raised by mothers without there being that father discipline and that strong, more rational, logical approach, and have that balance out the feminine. Without that, you've got a lot of men who are quite feminine in their outlook and in their behavior and in their ways of thinking, much less the women. And so, the toxicity grows exponentially as each generation creates more children before they're barely, out of childhood themselves, and increasing the fatherlessness. So, that's why I've decided to go ahead and create my Patreon account so that I could talk about some more things and not get bogged down into gaslighting, narcissistic, attention getting, run of the mill playbook that every black activist has to run around. What about slavery? What about Jim Crow? What about this? What about that? I've heard it at least 80,000 times since I was 18. So I don't want to go back over all of that. Been there and done that. And so I'd rather have productive conversations and produce productive videos. So that's what I do on my Patreon. And it's called The Bus Transfer. And I chose that name specifically because, we start life out on one path, but when we get on this bus at the beginning of our life, we have the option at any time during our lives to ask that conductor for a transfer and to get off of that bus and get on another bus and go a different route. And that's really what I promote for Black people, is getting yourself off of this dysfunctional, victimized, going to hell underclass bus that is just never going to right itself until each individual decides to, pull themselves up by their bootstraps and stop looking at the past and stop waiting for life to give you what you want or what you feel you deserve. Sometimes you just got to get out there and do it for yourself and then claim your, whatever recompense you feel you deserve in other forms, but to spend your entire life not doing much of anything, waiting for white folk, for this person, that person to say they're sorry or to, hand you all of their wealth. With you not even knowing what to do with your wealth, don't even know how to, manage money, manage your income, keep your credit score high, make decisions that are going to be important for building and maintaining wealth for your future generations. There's so much we could be spending our time on rather than all of this, nonsense circular activity. So that's part and parcel why I say it's time for those. And I feel that more and more are making this transfer. They're getting off of this dead end bus and moving into a more productive means, mode of transportation throughout the rest of their lives. And so that's why I created the Patreon, and I'm really enjoying it so far, and definitely going to be building on a lot of these topics, minus the played out 1970s playbook that Black people haven't moved beyond. So have a great day, you guys, and I will see you soon.